Hi, I'm Beck and welcome to a video where I discuss Rhythm of War, specifically the best bits, the best moments, and the best scenes that I rediscovered while doing my reread recently. So buckle in and let's get into it. I'm going to put this down because I don't want to hold a giant chunk of a book for the whole video. Firstly, I forgot the book opened up with Lirin, which is Kaladin's father, and there's this fantastic quote from him, and it says, "Heroism is a myth you tell idealistic young people, specifically when you want them to bleed for you. It got one of my sons killed and another taken from me. You can keep your heroism and return to me the lives of those you wasted in foolish conflicts." So it's about Lirin and how he just wants to conform and he doesn't want to fight because that means bloodshed. So for him, if you put your head down and you try not to make a fuss, then things will work out. But Kaladin's like, well, that's not how it works. I need to fight for the people that I care about. And that quote alone made me hate Lirin, but obviously across the series he changes and grows, so I don't hate him as much, but I'm still like, I got my eye on you. Specifically though, a character that I hate is Moash, when at the beginning of the story he has an encounter with Kaladin and he's like, I want you to stop hurting, I want you to be free. The answer is to stop existing. You've always known it, haven't you? And I'm like, how can you possibly say that to someone who you used to call a friend? Even though he goes by Via now, which is his fresh new edgy fused name, I hope he never gets a redemption arc. I don't care that ODM is taking all of his pain. I don't care. He needs to die. Very spectacularly. Killed by someone who's probably not Kaladin, but who also deserves to do it. Navani would be great. There is something about the revelations that have come out so far in the Stormlight archive in terms of the world building, for example, why the Radiants broke their oaths, and I don't think we've had the exact reason yet, but we think we have. And there's a conversation between Kaladin and Dalinar, and Kaladin says, but sir, wasn't Honor their god before he was ours? Meaning, wasn't he the listener's god before the Voidbringers? And the book says that that was one of the revelations that shook the first Radiant, that they weren't first settlers on this world and they came from off-world and then settled on the world. But I'm like, all of the Windrunners, for example, are the most honorable of the Knights Radiant so far. And in the story that we've seen, they haven't broken their oaths and they all know this truth. I mean, they know it, but they probably haven't accepted it, but still, Kaladin could see the way Dalinar winced whenever the idea was discussed. This world had belonged to the Singers with Honor as their god until humans had arrived bringing odium. So it's still an area of consensus. I don't think that we know the whole reason that the Radiants abandoned their oaths. And then before they get split up, we get this really sweet scene between Adolin and Kaladin of support, and Syl goes and gets Adolin because she's worried about Kaladin, and rightly so. He's going to one of his depressive episodes, and Adolin comes and bursts through his door and like takes him out. And so he's like, tell me honestly with an oath, Kaladin, tell me that you should be left alone tonight. Swear it to me. And Kaladin's like, God damn it. Syl then follows it up with, I needed someone that you couldn't intimidate, which is great that Adolin is just like this happy-go-lucky sunshine person who Kaladin just doesn't have any effect on, even though he's like an embodiment of a storm. He's so grumpy. It's just a great dynamic. Something that I forgot, and it seemed a little bit unexpected, was that Rock just left. He's saying, you gave me back my life. Thank you for that, Kaladin, bridge leader. Do not be sad that I now choose to live that life. So he's going to seek trial for using the shard bow. He's returning to the Horneater Peaks. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to say goodbye to Rock. Like, he's such a key side character. I miss him so much. And while I'm glad for him to go on his journey, I hope we get something about him in the future. I think Sanderson mentioned that he's going to do a novella or something, and I really hope so because I miss Rock so much. And then of course Kaladin is going about trying to understand who he is without being bridge leader anymore. So after being removed from active duty by Dalinar, and he's going to Zahael, who is the swordmaster and an ardent in this story, but we know him as someone from Warbreaker, and he's having an almost sparring session between like hanging up laundry with Kaladin, and he's saying, I can tell more about a man when the odds are against him. You can't join the Ardents. You're unwelcome because you don't belong with us. And at the end of the fight, it says he tossed his scarf at Kaladin's feet, though it must have been a different scarf, for the one he'd started with had been bright red and this one was dull grey. He's using the Warbreaker magic system. It's just so cool to see any kind of Cosmere reference in this story, and I hope they become even more prevalent in the sequel. Kaladin notices that Zahael isn't like a normal swords fighter, and he's like, what are you? Are you like Wit? And he's like, no, I don't think there's anyone else quite like Hoyd. I knew him by the name Dust when I was younger. I think he must have 1,000 different names among 1,000 different peoples. Zahael or Zael is also telling Kaladin about the fused, and he's saying, you need a weapon so strong it unravels the soul. No pressure. And I had an outlandish theory here that I've just inserted into my notes, and I don't think it's going to be true, but I also think it's interesting because we know about Zael and how he died and now he's like a spren almost, but he's been almost reincarnated. And then I was like, is Shallan the same as Xyle in the sense that she's a level 2 invested being? So she was wiped away and then her soul was recreated, and that's what she's suppressing, her own death, which would be interesting. Upon finishing Rhythm of War and remembering the ending, I don't think that's how it is anymore, but it was honestly just a cool thought to have in the moment, like, oh, what if this is a thing? And then before our characters split up, so before the journey into Shadesmar that Adolin is leading, and then before Kaladin remains at the tower, Adolin comes to visit Kaladin to say goodbye, and he's like, in a perfect world, no one would have to train for battle. We don't live in a perfect world. How does this relate to me? Kaladin asks. Well, there's no shame in you taking time away from the sword, maybe permanently. Adolin is the only one who has come up to Kaladin specifically and basically reinforced that Kaladin's doing the right thing and that there's no shame in it. He's the only one who has like reassured Kaladin, which is just really nice. Adolin is also like, at the same time, I know you enjoy it though, and Kaladin says, I shouldn't enjoy killing. And Adolin frames it in such a good way, and this is why these two are ride or die. And Adolin's like, you can hate killing and enjoy the contest. Plus, there are practical reasons to keep your skills up. Take these months to relax. When I return, let's find the chance to spar again together, all right? I want you to see what I see in duels. It's not about hurting others, it's about being your best. And when I read that, it made me so emotional because I'm like, Adolin sees Kaladin, like he understands. And because they've been separated for so long because of the Shadesmar and, you know, that journey, I'm like, I hope they come back together because I really like seeing their dynamic together. They seem to really understand each other. And if they're not, you know, together in scenes in Wind and Truth, I'm going to be really sad. And then, of course, while there's all this kerfuffle about Dalinar going off for war and Adolin going to Shadesmar, Kaladin feels like he's being left behind. And that's when Teft comes into the clinic because Kaladin's family have been brought to Urithiru, the tower, and there's been a clinic set up, and Kaladin feels like he's just reverted to what he was in book 1, like he's gone, okay, maybe I should be a surgeon and work as an assistant alongside his father, although that doesn't feel right to him either. So he's like, I'm alone, I've reverted, like who am I anymore? And then Teft appears and supports Kaladin. And I just love how in this book a lot of characters have rallied to support him. And Teft is like, so what are we doing? You said you wanted a diagnosis. Teft also said, nah, I know I'm crazy already. You're going to poke at me until I snap? Skip that part. What are we doing today? Binding wounds? Kaladin gave him a level stare. Teft just stared back, stubborn as a storm. I think out of everyone, Teft is the only one who can outstare Kaladin. Kaladin found himself feeling warm. They weren't all gone. Thank you, Teft. Again, it just makes me emotional. And then we've got Kaladin having his almost aha moment when he's like, studying with my father as an assistant doesn't really fulfill me, but understanding people's mental health, because the Ardents don't understand. So whenever someone is sick in the head, as they say in this series, they are sent to the Ardents for looking after, but the Ardents just put them in a dark cell and they don't know how to treat these people. And Kaladin's like, hand some of these people over to me, like I know how I can help and care for them, because he's like, I've been there myself. And so he's finding his own almost niche in this world that hasn't existed before, because he's got that specific training as a surgeon. So he's part of the way there, but he's like, this isn't enough. Like I need to help people who can't help themselves. Ironically, talking about mental health, my notes then skip to a scene with Shallan and it's Patton going, Shallan, I'm worried about you. You say you're getting better, but I worry. Adolin agrees, though I don't think he sees what I do. Something else is looking out of your eyes sometimes, something new. It comes out when I try to talk about your past. So I'm afraid to do it. Sometimes you tease that you want me to say more, but then those other eyes see me, which gave me chills when I was reading it. That is such a horror story to read about. To me, Rhythm of War was really an Adolin book and a Navani book and a Kaladin book, obviously. But Adolin had so many great scenes and great quotes. And one of them is, I think, when he took Shallan on almost a little mini date in Shadesmar, and he's talking to her because he's worried about her. And he says, no one ever accomplished anything by being content with who they were, Shallan. We accomplish great things by reaching towards who we could become, which is a great way to also describe his own self-journey in trying to be honourable and find honour in other people, specifically the honor spren, which he doesn't feel are honourable at all. They've just become stuck in their ways. He observes like humans can become, and he's like, what is the point of being here if they're not going to give me an honorable trial? Also a standout point with Adolin is his sword Maya, and how she manifests as an actual like full-size spren in Shadesmar rather than a sword, so he can actually kind of interact with her there, and he's been excited to go back to Shadesmar so he can do that. And when there is an ambush in Shadesmar, she is the one who comes and stands at his back, and then they perform a kata together, which is all those sword stances one after the other to intimidate the other group so that Maya can effectively save Adolin from being killed. He's been stabbed, like he's on his last legs. And so just seeing that loyalty and that understanding was so good. Like I think I either got goosebumps or teared up. You can also see Dalinar talking to the Stormfather and considering how to fix what the old Radiants abandoned. And he's saying, could I reforge it? Could I remake the Oath Pact and bind the fused away again? And the Stormfather says, I don't know, it may be possible, but I have no idea how or if it will be wise. The Heralds suffer for what they did. And honestly, because this has been done before, I don't think this is how Wind and Truth is going to end. I think this is going to be a variation of what's going to happen, but it's not going to be the be all and end all. And I'm so concerned about Dalinar. I'm so concerned about all of the characters that I love, honestly. And the fact that Adolin said to Kaladin that they would meet up again and do a duel together, that's almost like a promise in a story or a movie. And whenever someone says I promise, they usually die. So I'm really now worried about whether those two will actually see each other again for any length of time. And again, to reiterate what I said before about how this is an Adolin and Navani story, like it sheds light on the side characters. It also did a little bit to Renarin as well, and Dalinar is observing him, and it said Renarin set his bowl beside his seat. It was easy to fall into the habit of underestimating him. He always moved so carefully, almost like he was fragile. But then Dalinar was like, don't forget, when you were broken on the floor, consumed by your past, this boy held you. Don't forget who was strong when you, the Blackthorn, were weak. I'm really interested to see where Renarin's Truthwatcher gifts come into play, especially because he's got a corrupted spren, and how that is going to impact the story, especially because Odium can't see his futures. I'm really interested to see how that pans out. We got a little bit more about Wit and Yasna in this book, and I actually, probably an unpopular opinion, but I don't like Yasna. Anyway, she was talking with Wit, and Wit says, I believe it is time that I told you about Thydeka. The Ghostbloods are not a Rasharan organization, and I don't think you appreciate the danger they represent. So it's Thydeka and the Ghostbloods versus the characters in Rosha, and you know, if you've read the other Cosmere books, you probably know who Thydeka is, which makes things very interesting. But then circling back to Adolin and how I mentioned the trial and the Honor Spren, and we encounter Notum, and he was in, I think, Oathbringer when they were in Shadesmar as well. And he captained the ship that Adolin was on. He also ran into them again in this book, and Adolin saved them from, you know, all those bandits. And now Notum has been put to trial against Adolin, and Adolin's like, fine, if this is how you want to be honorable, say what you will, because this is not a fair trial and I should have known that when I was going into it. And Notum really changes tone, and he says honor is not dead so long as it lives in the hearts of men. And that is such a pinnacle moment and quote, I think, in this series, because it turns a lot of the court into a shambles basically, and it reflects their ugliness back at them. Like, maybe you should actually take accountability for what you're doing and actually show that you're honorable instead of hiding in your little hidey hole castle in Shadesmar and try and ignore the world and perceive it how you want to rather than how you should be. It was a great support to Adolin, and you know, Notum got marched out of the court afterwards, but I feel like he made his point. Something that made me sad though in this book was Shallan. So Vale ended up dying because she got reabsorbed by Shallan, and she's like, I've protected you all these years, but it's time for me to be done. And we get more understanding of Shallan's past here, where she's like, I killed her, I killed my spren, I broke my oaths and I killed her. Her memories were hidden. I'm your Vale. And Shallan took those memories back. So Vale was like, I'm gone. I'm not the Vale against your memories anymore. I'm not protecting you anymore. You need to encounter some truths so that you can learn who you are properly. And that's why I don't think that Shallan is a spren anymore, like I thought earlier when I was reading about Xyle. So she's not a level 2 invested being. She just killed her spren, and that's why she's got so much trauma. So I don't think that I'm right. But I also completely forgot that she killed a spren, which makes sense that Patton doesn't remember everything about her past because he wasn't there, it was someone else. But that moment with Shallan is when she is infiltrating the castle to find Rastares for the Ghostbloods. So she's having her own like character moment while the trial is happening for Adolin. And so we flick back to the trial, and Adolin's last witness is his sword Maya, and she's brought up onto the stand against her will. You can see the other spren like grabbing her and jostling her, and she's really in a lot of pain, and she's trying to escape from them, but they're not letting her. And then Adolin is demanding that she be let go, but he's being held back as well. And then when she sags and she's, weakening, he says to her, take some of my strength. And he feels this warmth from her. And it says she looked right at him despite her scratched out eyes, and she saw him. Adolin felt something, a warmth deep within him. Maya drew in strength, preparing to shout again. Adolin braced himself for her screech, and she spoke. We chose. And I think, not burst into tears, but I shed tears at that point because, oh, what a moment. It means that all of the Spren that are Deadeye chose to break their oaths, or they chose their radiance, and they didn't anticipate that they would die when the oaths were broken, but they made their choices. So they're like, maybe you should pull your fingers out on a Spren and go and join the fight against Odium because we all chose. And we are proud of our choice. And I'm like, hell yeah, Maya, tell them. But then we're getting into the last couple of notes and quotes that I wrote down. And it's when Dalinar has finished his book. He's finished writing Oathbringer, even though men in Roshar don't write. He's learned how to, he's written his book. It's very scandalous, but he needed to get everything down. And he's talking to Yasna and he's like, I would like you to do something for me. All of the great philosophical texts have an undertext. I would like you to write the undertext for Oathbringer openly, to be discovered by any who would like to read it. I find the insights in undertext to be essential. They change how I read. History is written by the victors, but at least we have contrary insights from those who watched. So I love that he's got this text and then Yasna is going to rewrite all of her understandings under it. And that makes me wonder, like, is this book going to survive whatever happens at the end of Wind and Truth for then our other characters in however hundreds of years' time to then find and contest what has happened in the past? Like, is this going to carry on? I'm so interested. And of course it wouldn't be the end of a book, like the Sanderlange moment of a book, if we didn't have something really rad from Kaladin. And it's in Fighting the Pursuer when he's like, I am death itself, defeated one. And I have finally caught up to you. Can't you just imagine him standing in a doorway, like with a spear, the shadow over his face, just intimidating? Oh, it's so good. And then I'm going to end on some devastating points, which is when I started to bawl my eyes out once again, and it's upon Teft's death scene, and Moash, just before he kills Teft says to him, but know this, you can kill me, but you can't have what I have. You can never have it because I die knowing I'm loved. Everyone hates Moash. Teft confirmed it to Moash's face. The end. And then of course we've got Navani bonding the Tower Spren so she becomes her own bondsmith after understanding scholarship and becoming a scholar herself and finally not being the sidelined character in the shadow of somebody else that she has been for so long, especially after marrying Gavilar and now in supporting Dalinar, although it's definitely not the same thing as when she was with Gavilar. So I love that she got to carve out her own space and figure out her own identity and be recognized as a scholar. But then yes, obviously she bonds the Erithru Tower Spren called the Sibling, and she's facing off against Moash when she bonds this Spren, and she's already bleeding out, like she's about to die, but she bonds the Spren and she becomes overwhelmed with light and restoring the connection with the tower, and she's like, journey before destination, you bastard, to Moash as he flees. And I'm like, that is the best line I think of the entire series. It brings me so much gratification. Overall, this is just such a pinnacle book. Not only that quote was just like amazing, but we've also got Kaladin saying his fourth ideal and getting, the armor. We've got Wit, who is at the end waiting for Odium to come and talk to him, and Odium does something funny with Wit's memory, which I am a little bit nervous about. And then we've also got Taravangian becoming Odium, which I'm not really sure what to think about it. Initially I was like, wait, does that mean that he's not evil anymore? Because Kharbranth was saved, which is, his city. So he's saved everyone that he wants to. He's fulfilled the diagram. He's now trying to defeat Odium, so in becoming Odium instead, he's going to do what Odium wasn't going to do. Like, is he just going to submit to the power and then be a smarter version of Odium? At least Dalinar's deal still stands, so Taravangian's bonding of Odium doesn't override that, but Szeth saw Taravangian die, and then in the spiritual realm, that's when Taravangian bonded Odium. So everyone thinks Taravangian is dead. So I'm waiting for the moment that's the penny drop of when Odium, like the new Odium, says something and Dalinar realizes that it's not the old Odium that he was talking to. Like, there's so much left to explore and understand and to plot twist, and these characters only have 10 days before the world ends, so I'm not nervous at all. But that is it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking with me this long. I can't wait to come down and talk to you in the comments, but thank you again so much for watching watching this video. I'll chat to you down below and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.